They told you discipline is everything, that if you wake up early, grind without complaint, and stick to your routine no matter what, you'll win. But what if that's the biggest lie you've ever believed? What if your so-called strength is the very thing keeping you powerless? Because here's the brutal truth: discipline makes you predictable. And in a world where power belongs to the unpredictable, the adaptive, the ruthlessly strategic, being disciplined isn't dangerous. It's safe, it's visible, it's controllable. Machiavelli would not admire the man who never skips a day. He would study him and use him. This video isn't about motivation. It's about war, psychological war, strategic power, and how discipline, if used the wrong way, turns you into the perfect servant in someone else's system. If you've ever wondered why you're consistent but still stuck, focused, but still replaceable, loyal, but still invisible, this is the wake-up call you weren't supposed to hear. Because the game doesn't reward the man who follows the rules. It rewards the man who rewrites them. They told you discipline is the answer, that if you just wake up early enough, stay consistent long enough, and push through the discomfort hard enough, you'll become someone powerful, someone untouchable. But what they didn't tell you is this discipline, when followed blindly, is not a weapon, it's a leash. And most men wear it proudly, mistaking obedience for strength. They call it self-mastery. They call it hustle. But Machiavelli would call it something else entirely: submission. Not to a person, but to a system. A system built not to elevate you, but to control you. You think waking up at 5 a.m. makes you elite. You think sticking to your routine no matter what makes you strong. No, it makes you readable, predictable. And in the game of power, predictability is weakness dressed as virtue. You were taught that consistency equals greatness, but that formula only works if you're the one designing the game. Most aren't. Most people are disciplined inside of someone else's blueprint. They're executing routines they didn't create, chasing goals they didn't question, and sacrificing energy for rituals that serve no real outcome. They're loyal soldiers marching in formation, never stopping to ask where that formation is actually going. And when the path stops serving them, they stay on it, not because it's effective, but because they've confused routine with righteousness. That's not power. That's psychological obedience hidden beneath motivational quotes. Machiavelli would laugh at this illusion. He would say, "You've been trained not to lead, but to comply." And compliance is not rewarded with power. It's rewarded with predictability. Employers love the disciplined worker. He shows up on time. He doesn't complain. He stays within the lines. He's reliable, replaceable, invisible. And that's the trap. Discipline makes you dependable to others while disconnecting you from your own strategic mind. It numbs your instincts. It erases your adaptability. You stop questioning and start performing. Not because it works, but because that's what strong people do. You become a machine that forgot how to think. But power never belonged to the machine. Power belongs to the one who controls the machine and knows when to shut it down. You weren't born to be loyal to a process. You were born to master outcomes. That means knowing when to strike and knowing when to stop, when to build and when to burn. It takes more strength to abandon a plan that no longer serves you than to persist just to maintain the illusion of discipline. But most men are afraid of that silence. They're afraid to admit that their consistency has become their cage. So they hide inside their rituals, hoping that effort alone will buy them respect. But respect without control is hollow. Discipline might win you applause, but it won't win you power. It won't make you feared. It won't make you free. Because the man who needs his routine to feel powerful has already surrendered the game. The man who can walk away from it without guilt, that man is untouchable. And Machiavelli would say, if your strength depends on staying in line, then you were never dangerous to begin with. You were only obedient. And in a world ruled by strategy, not effort, obedience is not a virtue. It's your leash. Discipline is not the enemy. But when it replaces strategy, it becomes your silent assassin. We've been told that discipline is the foundation of success. Wake up at the same time every day. Repeat the habits. Don't skip. Don't quit. Don't question. But that's exactly where the trap lies. When discipline becomes an identity instead of a tool, it hijacks your judgment. You begin to stay loyal to routines that have stopped creating results. You keep grinding long after the goal has shifted. You call it focus. But Machiavelli would call it blindness. Strategy is not about how hard you work, it's about where, when, and why you work. And here's the brutal truth: discipline without strategy is motion without direction. A man can sprint full speed into a wall and still think he's making progress simply because he never stopped moving. That's not strength. That's wasted willpower. And in a world where timing and adaptability determine power-wasting energy on outdated routines is the most sophisticated form of self-sabotage. But it feels good, doesn't it? To check the box, to hit your streak, to say I've done this for 100 days. You've built consistency. But have you built leverage? Machiavelli would argue that the strategic man uses discipline like a sword, not a shield. He doesn't cling to it out of fear or pride. He sharpens it, swings it, and puts it down the moment it no longer serves his purpose. Because strategy is not loyal to a method, it's loyal only to outcomes. It doesn't care how long you've followed a routine, how committed you've been, how noble your consistency appears. If it doesn't move the needle toward control, power, or advantage, it is cut without hesitation. Not because the man is weak, but because he's dangerous. Disciplined men fear inconsistency. Strategic men use it. Think of the man who refuses to quit a project because he already put too much time into it. That's not discipline, it's ego dressed as commitment. That's fear of admitting a mistake, not a strategy for victory. A true tactician doesn't hesitate to walk away. He understands that quitting the wrong thing is just as important as sticking to the right one. And that ability to let go instantly without apology is what gives him speed, agility, and presence of mind in a world moving faster by the day. Here's the test. Would you break your routine today if doing so meant doubling your advantage tomorrow? Most can't. Most are so addicted to the rhythm they created that they no longer ask if the beat still matters. And so they grind. Not because it's working, but because they're afraid of being lost without it. Strategy doesn't fear disruption. It requires it. It demands a kind of ruthless clarity, a willingness to abandon comfort in service of control. Machiavelli knew this power isn't given to the loyal. It's taken by the flexible. So stop asking, did I follow the plan, and start asking, did this move shift the game, if not change it? Burn it. Pivot instantly. Because the disciplined man builds habits. The strategic man builds momentum. And only one of them controls the board. Strategy is not a rejection of effort. It's the elevation of effort. It's the ability to direct every drop of energy towards something that actually matters. Discipline without strategy is busy work. But strategy with discipline, that's a weapon. Wield it wisely, or be ruled by someone who does. If they can predict you, they can control you. That's the brutal truth most people never confront. They mistake routine for power, consistency for strength. But Machiavelli knew better. In war, in politics, in love, predictability is a liability. It doesn't matter how disciplined you are, how early you rise, or how many days in a row you followed the same system. If your enemy knows what you'll do next, he doesn't have to fight you. He just has to wait for you to follow your own script. That's how kingdoms fall, not from chaos. From repetition. We live in a world that worships the predictable man, the man who never skips a day, who always replies on time, who's calm, polite, steady. And yet it is not this man who is feared. He is respected, yes, applauded, but not feared, because anyone who can be mapped can be manipulated. The real threat, the real power lies in the man no one can read, the man who disappears just when they expect him, who stays silent when they expect him to speak, who pivots when they think he'll persist. That man isn't following a system, he is the system. Machiavelli would say that your patterns are your prison. Every habit you announce, every routine you display, every "this is who I am" you declare gives others a map a way in. Your girlfriend knows when you'll text. Your boss knows how you'll react. Your enemies. They're watching your consistency like it's a clock. And every tick makes you more vulnerable. You don't need to be weak to lose. You just need to be predictable. Think of a predator. A lion doesn't chase the strongest animal, it waits for the most predictable one. The one who always drinks from the same spot, walks the same path, follows the same rhythm. Human behavior isn't different. In the game of dominance, the most dangerous man is not the most aggressive. It's the one who breaks his rhythm before anyone else can use it against him. Most men don't realize how exposed they are. They wake up at 6 a.m. Every day, go to the gym at 7, drink the same shake post, the same motivational quote. They believe their identity is rooted in discipline. But identity, when fixed, becomes a weakness. Because once you're known for always doing something, it takes only one person to use that knowledge against you. Predictability isn't just boring, it's dangerous. And it's the easiest trait to exploit. The Machiavellian mind moves differently. He doesn't show his pattern. In fact, he disrupts it intentionally. He delays a response just to see how others react. He switches up his habits to remain unreadable. He vanishes when expected, reappears when it hurts the most. This isn't chaos, it's controlled confusion. It creates tension, mystery, power. When people can't figure you out, they hesitate, they overthink, they fear. And in that pause, you win. So ask yourself, can they track you? Do you live by a rhythm so tight that others can forecast your mood, your presence, your next move? If so, you're not powerful, you're exposed. The most dangerous man doesn't walk the same path twice. Not because he can't, but because he refuses to leave footprints. He doesn't fear being inconsistent. He fears being decoded. And once someone knows your rhythm, they already know your weakness. Control your behavior, but never let the world predict it. At first, structure feels like freedom. It gives you direction, clarity, and control. You build habits, you create routines, you set alarms, follow schedules, and form rituals. People applaud you for it. You feel disciplined, focused, accomplished. But here's the truth. No one tells you the structure you build to free yourself can quietly become your cage. What starts as a tool becomes your identity. And once your identity is trapped inside a routine, you no longer control the system. The system controls you. Machiavelli would warn, when discipline becomes doctrine, it stops being useful. It becomes your leash. Most people think their routine is their power. I wake up at 5 a.m. I never miss a workout. I journal every morning. But when you ask them why, they don't know. They just repeat the habit because it makes them feel in control even when it no longer produces results. They follow the plan even when the terrain has changed. They persist because quitting feels like failure, not realizing that persistence without power is just motion without direction. They worship the structure, and in doing so, they slowly surrender their adaptability, the one thing that makes them dangerous. Machiavelli never rejected structure. He used it, but he never worshipped it, because he understood that what once served you can easily enslave you. The moment your identity becomes attached to a habit, you lose the ability to walk away from it, even when walking away would give you the upper hand. That's the irony of self-discipline. It begins as mastery, but can end in self-oppression. You don't need chains when your pride keeps you locked in place. Think of the man who prides himself on never skipping a day. He pushes through sickness, exhaustion, even irrelevance because he made a commitment. But what is that commitment to exactly? The goal, the outcome. Or is it just to the comfort of repetition? That's not strength. That's fear in disguise. Fear of change. Fear of letting go. Fear of having to reassess what matters. And fear, no matter how well disguised, is always exploitable. The Machiavellian mind refuses to be confined. He uses discipline as long as it produces leverage, not just motion. He builds systems not for pride but for utility. And the second the structure stops serving him, he breaks it, without hesitation, without guilt, because he doesn't serve the structure. The structure serves him. This detachment is what gives him power. He can burn the plan today and build a better one tomorrow. No emotional weight, no loss of identity, just momentum, pure, ruthless momentum. This is where most people fail. They mistake longevity for value. I've done this for years, they say, as if time invested makes a habit sacred. But Machiavelli would remind you, effort is meaningless if the outcome is hollow. A routine that worked last year may be your weakness today. And your inability to abandon it isn't proof of character, it's proof you've stopped thinking strategically. That's how routines become prisons, not because someone locked you inside, but because you forgot you had the key all along. So ask yourself honestly, are your structures still serving you, or are you serving them? Do your routines sharpen you, or just keep you busy? If the answer is unclear, you may already be inside the cage. And the worst part, it's a cage you built yourself, and one the world will applaud you for staying in. But Machiavelli wouldn't. He'd tell you to shatter it, because no structure is worth more than your freedom to adapt, and no habit, no matter how disciplined, is worth your dominance. The most dangerous man isn't the one who's always in control. He's the one who knows exactly when to break it. In a world that rewards consistency and labels it as strength, most people become addicted to their routines, wearing them like armor, hoping it will protect them. But Machiavelli saw what others missed. When your pattern becomes predictable, it becomes a target. And the man who cannot break his own rhythm will eventually be broken by someone else. True power does not come from discipline alone. It comes from the ability to shatter your pattern before it's used against you. Most people fear inconsistency because they believe it signals weakness. They think changing course makes them look unreliable, that breaking a routine makes them appear unstable. But the Machiavellian man knows better. He understands that controlled disruption is the ultimate strategy. He disappears when they expect him to show up. He pivots the moment others believe they've mapped his steps. He pauses when others expect aggression and strikes when they assume he's still resting. This is not chaos. It's psychological warfare. And it's terrifying to those who expect you to behave the same way every day. Why is this so powerful? Because once they can't track your behavior, they begin to doubt their perception. They lose confidence in their read of you. They hesitate. They question. And in that hesitation, you gain time space and leverage. That's what unpredictability buys you control over the rhythm of others. It forces the world to react to your silence, to your absence, to your sudden movement. And in a world obsessed with forecasting and performance, the untrackable man becomes the most feared man in the room. Let's be clear, this isn't about being reckless. Strategic inconsistency is not laziness or mood swings. It's intelligent disruption. The man who uses it is deeply self-aware. He knows his patterns, he studies them, and he breaks them on purpose. He doesn't break discipline because he's bored, he breaks it because the moment requires it. Because predictability would cost him the edge. Because enemies are watching, and the only way to stay untouchable is to make sure no one ever sees the full pattern. Imagine someone who always responds right away. You know they'll reply. You expect it. Now what happens when they stop? Suddenly you lean in. You reread their last message. You overthink. They've created uncertainty, and uncertainty is power. That's the essence of Machiavellian movement, not to confuse yourself, but to confuse everyone else. To make your presence a question, not an answer. Because if they think they know what you'll do, they'll start to move against you. But if they're not sure where you stand, how you'll react, or when you'll strike, they can't touch you. The disciplined man seeks routine to feel safe, but the strategic man learns to feel safe in motion, in pivoting, in shifting shape. He finds stability in adaptability. That's the paradox of power. The more flexible you are, the less breakable you become. Because when you train yourself to let go of your pattern, you stop being a character in someone else's story and start becoming the author of your own. Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to break your rhythm just to be different. He'd tell you to break it. Because the moment you stop being predictable, you start being dangerous. So stop clinging to consistency for comfort. Start breaking it intentionally. That's not failure. That's mastery. Consistency feels noble. It feels like virtue. You tell yourself that showing up every day, pushing through the pain, never missing a step, that's what winners do. And sometimes it is, but only if what you're doing still creates real-world impact. Without results, consistency becomes a ritual, a hollow performance you repeat. Not because it works, but because it makes you feel like you're making progress. And that's the danger. That's the trap Machiavelli would have called the most seductive of all the illusion of growth. There's a moment where persistence turns into self-deception. When a routine no longer moves you forward, but you keep doing it because it's familiar, safe, and applauded. You've built a streak. You've told yourself that breaking it would be weakness, so you continue not because it gives you power, but because the alternative would force you to confront a painful truth that your effort isn't working anymore. That your time, your energy, your emotional investment are being poured into a container with a crack at the bottom, and deep down, you know it. But instead of pivoting, you cling harder to the very system that's holding you back. Why? Because humans fear loss more than they desire gain. You don't want to lose the pride you've built around your streak. You've wrapped your identity around it. I never skip a day, I always finish what I start. But Machiavelli would ask you this finish. What exactly? What are you really building? Power, leverage, freedom. Or are you just repeating a process that no longer produces value simply because consistency has become a religion? We live in a culture obsessed with hustle and grind, but the truth is, effort is not the same as progress. You can journal every morning, meditate, eat clean, hit the gym, and still be invisible, replaceable, powerless. Because those habits, as good as they sound, mean nothing if they're not tied to a strategy. If they don't get you closer to something that matters, control, influence, precision, they are just activity for activity's sake. A sophisticated form of self-soothing disguised as improvement. The Machiavellian mind rejects that kind of delusion. He doesn't ask, "Did I stick to the plan today?" He asks, "Did today's actions bring me measurable advantage?" If the answer is no, the habit is dropped instantly. No drama, no guilt. Because his loyalty is not to the process, but to the outcome. That's what separates the powerful from the busy. The powerful pivot, the busy persist. And the more time you spend honoring a dead system, the further you drift from the very result you claim to want. So ask yourself honestly, are you being consistent because it's working or because it's what you're used to? Are you following the habit because it brings results or because breaking it would make you feel like a failure? Because here's the truth. Discipline without results is just ritual. And rituals, while comforting, are rarely dangerous. The dangerous man, the man Machiavelli would respect, isn't addicted to movement. He's addicted to power. And if that power demands that he pivot, quit, or completely reinvent his process, he doesn't hesitate. Because in the end, the world doesn't reward how long you tried. It rewards what worked. Results are the only metric that matter. And if your routine isn't producing them, then it doesn't matter how consistent you've been. You're just getting better at staying in the same place. We've been taught that discipline is control, that waking up early, following a strict routine, mastering your impulses, that's how you become powerful. But that's only half the truth. Because real power, true power, doesn't come from simply mastering yourself. It comes from mastering the game, from bending the environment, the timing, and the people around you to serve your will. Discipline might give you control over your own behavior, but it won't give you control over outcomes. And in a world ruled by leverage, the man who only controls himself is still at the mercy of those who control the system. This is where Machiavelli's thinking breaks from modern motivational cliches. He wouldn't glorify the man who shows up every day, who never breaks routine, who powers through no matter what. He'd say, fine, you've trained yourself to follow orders, but whose orders are you following? Because if your habits serve a system that was never designed for your advantage, then all you've built is reliability, not power. And reliability is what makes you useful to others. It doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you predictable. And predictability, as Machiavelli knew, is how power escapes you. The strategic man understands that discipline is just a foundation, never the goal. You discipline yourself, so you can act with precision, not repetition. You build routines so you can break them intelligently when the terrain shifts. You develop self-mastery not to follow rules but to manipulate them. That's the difference. The disciplined man trains himself to stay the course. The Machiavellian man trains himself to redirect the course entirely if it no longer leads to advantage, because he's not loyal to the process. He's loyal to the result. Control over yourself means little if you can't adapt to the battlefield. What happens when the plan falls apart? When the market shifts? When the opponent plays a card you didn't expect? The disciplined man tightens his grip. He keeps grinding, keeps executing, keeps repeating because that's what he's trained to do. But the Machiavellian man smiles. He steps back. He recalculates. He throws out the old plan not with panic, but with precision. Because he's not here to stay on schedule. He's here to win. And that's the truth. Most people avoid. Winning requires control over more than yourself. It demands foresight. It demands psychological agility. It demands that you know when to hold the line and when to disappear. That you know how to read the room, bend the narrative, and strike at the exact moment when everyone else is still adjusting. Discipline can't teach you that. Only strategy can. And strategy is built on one question. Does this move increase my control over the outcome? If not, it's discarded no matter how virtuous it looks from the outside. In the end, the disciplined man may earn applause, but it's the strategic man who earns power. He doesn't just wake up early, he wakes up aligned with what matters today, not yesterday. He doesn't just stick to habits, he sharpens instincts. He doesn't follow routines to feel productive, he executes only when execution gives him leverage. And when the storm comes, when the structure breaks, when the system shifts, he's not the one who crumbles. He's the one who rewrites the rules. Because power is not given to the man who can endure the plan. It's given to the man who can erase it and still win anyway. The real enemy of power isn't laziness. It's blind obedience to a system that no longer serves you. Discipline by itself is not evil. It can sharpen your focus, build momentum, and create structure. But when discipline becomes a badge you wear instead of a tool you wield, it turns into a trap. If you're following routines out of habit, sticking to plans out of pride, and repeating actions that no longer move you forward, then what you've built isn't discipline, it's a prison. Machiavellian wisdom teaches us that strategy must always come before effort. Power belongs to those who adapt, pivot, and move with precision. It's not about how many hours you work, how long your streak is, or how rigid your habits are. It's about knowing why you do what you do and being willing to change instantly when it no longer brings results. Ask yourself daily, does this still give me leverage? Is this serving the mission or just feeding my ego? If the answer is no, walk away. No guilt, no explanation. That's not quitting. That's control. If you found value in this message, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe for more content like this, like the video, and share it with someone who's stuck in the illusion of discipline. The path to power begins not with harder work, but with sharper awareness. Choose clarity over comfort, strategy over repetition, and freedom over the praise of predictability.